Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. My name is Alex Moore. I'm the director of CPPI, and we've also got Dr. David Bowers with us, who is a member of the Institute as well, and Paul Ernest. We are here today for a very exciting event. I'm going to turn it over to Paul to introduce the main star of the hour in just a second. But I'm sure that for all of us that are here, both Dr. Ernest and Dr. Skovsmose's work have had a profound impact on our professional life. And so it's a big honor for us to be hosting this event today, to have these two magnates of our field in conversation with each other and with you. This is a Zoom webinar, so the controls are a little bit different than a traditional Zoom meeting, and that's because of the number of attendees that we have. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a button for Q&A, and that's where you can ask questions either privately to us or to the entire group, and then we can answer them there. And we will be switching on and off between discussion and questions and answers throughout the event. And the event should last about 90 minutes. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Paul Ernest of the University of Exeter in the UK to introduce our main speaker. Paul, take it away.
Hi, thank you, Alex. Yes, I'm not going to say much because, I think Ulla's reputation precedes him. He's published something in the order of 30 books, I think, and some really influential and important ones. And we're going to talk about the latest one, the latest one that's published. And he's a giant in the field of critical mathematics education, but not just in terms of critical pedagogy and looking critically at the uses of mathematics in society, but also critical mathematics as a philosophy of mathematics. And I'll say a bit more about that later when I come to my interpretations and reflections. But let me just hand you over to the man himself, Ulla.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a real pleasure for me to be here and have this opportunity to talk with Paul and to listen to comments and questions. Questions don't need to be questions. I'm very ready to listen to comments, suggestions, proposals. I think of this as a conversation, including dialogues, and of course it's difficult with dialogues in the electronic version here, but this is somehow conversation is my hope and aspiration. Pleasure to be here. In 1993, I was sitting in an airplane on my way to South Africa. It was the first time I had been in South Africa, and it could not be anything but the first time because the boycott in solidarity with the ANC movement was very strong in the Scandinavian countries. There was no academic interaction with South Africa or with the white apartheid South Africa. But in 1993, this academic boycott was lifted because then the future was somehow appeared safe. There would come an election, at least it was assured. I was sitting there in the airplane, anxious. I was invited to join a conference and to give lectures here and there around the Durban area. I was very well prepared. I had all my slides for the overhead projector ready. I have read about South Africa. I have prepared myself to the best I could. I landed in the airport. Somebody picked me up. Or I don't know how I managed to do it, but I slammed the car door on my finger. And it hurt. Anyway, I had within my handkerchief and we got to the hotel in the beachfront in Durban. And people were enthusiastic. They talked to me and welcome and good to see you and critical math education here and critical math education there. And I was sitting talking, having my finger in a glass of ice water. they said, we think we should bring you to a doctor. I said, no, it's not necessary. But they convinced me. In fact, they convinced me easily. And they took me to, it was a clinic in the middle of a black township. It took some time. We were driving there, and there were black people here, black people there, small houses, horrible houses, environments completely different. I come to the surgery, but my eyes was looking around. This is South Africa. This is a township. This is, wow. I came to the surgery. I came to the doctor. It was an Indian doctor, because Indian doctors was allowed to touch black people, so they could be doctors for black people. White doctors could not be there. But he looked at me. He said, should I pull you a nail? It will fall off anyway. I remember clearly the question. I said, no, don't take the trouble. So he enveloped my fingers again in the proper way. I come to the hotel. And this evening and this night, I changed all my slides. This view there, it's different. What I had in mind to say didn't work here. I realized whatever I have thought, imagined, I have not imagined anything like what I saw in this trip there and this trip. So my conception of critical math education was somehow changed. So in my academic life, we can divide it in 3 periods. Before my finger went through the door, while my finger was in the door, and after my finger was out of the door. And my concept of critical math education changed much. The period 2, it was a kind of wake-up call. I said, wow, the situation, the context are different. Critical mathematics education, as I conceived it in the Danish North European context, it cannot be transferred like this. It's a different situation. And this is a deep experience for me. See, critical math education is so dependent on situation and context, historical, whatever. It's not a pattern. You cannot think of it as a pattern. Let me talk a little about, mention some labels. Just we have it. There are different labels around. Critical math education, mathematics education for social justice, mathematics for social justice, critical mathematics education, and related concepts like ethnomathematics, culturally responsive mathematics. I don't make any big deal of trying to distinguish between different labels. This is not the main point. And in fact, I see many activities among teachers in Denmark, which they don't call it critical math education. So they operate in what I would call critical math education without the labels. And it is all perfectly fine for me. I don't have any big consideration about to using the right labels. Clearly, ethnomathematics, there are ethnomathematical studies which I would not call critical math education. In their critical math educational studies, there's not ethnomathematical studies, clear enough, but there's a big overlapping. Let me make one comment about the label for critical mathematics education. I'm not too tempted to use this label because of linguistic reasons. In Danish, mathematics education is one word. Matematikundervisning, it's one word. I cannot add critical to this long word, which is long enough in advance. If I say critical mathematics education as a one-word thing, people would think it would appear just funny. In German, mathematics education is one word, Mathematikunterricht. So in Danish, Scandinavian language, German, critical is a qualification of mathematics education. It is a one-word thing. If we come to Portuguese, which I speak a little bit now, or Latin languages, whatever you call it, it'll end up in 3 words. Educação matemática crítica. Whatever you think you connect, it will be disconnected. I have no idea how they deal with critical mathematics in one word in Chinese or Japanese, how that would look like. So I'm a little bit reluctant to use labels which only function in English or have a point in English. I tried somehow to consider this. This is the reason I like the word critical mathematics education in 3 words. But it was a linguistic reading. In terms of content, I'm extremely flexible and open to what is happening beneath the labels and outside or without labels. Let's go to the expression education after Auschwitz. The German philosopher Adorno gave a radio interview in 1966 with the title Erziehung nach Auschwitz, Education After Auschwitz. You can find the article in the internet. I don't consider this any particular good article. It's a short one, and in fact, I don't like it too much. But it has a start. The first demand for any education is to make sure that Auschwitz does not happen again. And this is a powerful, it's a metaphor, but you also take it completely literally. It's a metaphor that education has a political role to play. It is important that education engage in social political issues. It is important as a demand for education to make sure that Auschwitz, horrible things, social injustices, whatever you put there, does not happen again. We have to combat against this. It's an educational obligation. And this was a kind of wake-up call to education in 1966. Because if you look at the journals in education before the Second World War, publication, but journals, you will see there were progressive journals talking about launching ideas of progressive education, the activity of the children, and many things. There was many discussions. Then came the Second World War. There was no issues in the magazines or the journals. Then it came again in 1946 with the same discussion. In the content of the journals, you could not see that the Second World War has happened. The discussion continues just the same. There was a bump in the time publishing, but not in change in the content. The wake-up call came only in 1966 by this talk by Adorno. And from this on, there emerged the idea of critical education. This became a broader issue. In 1966, it was made part of the students' movement. The the broader discussion of critical education. And it was a very powerful movement. It turned into practice. And just to look at the Danish context, there was, right after 62, there was students group discussing education. How should education be? In particular, university education. How should university education be organized, not dominated by the fixed curriculum, by the professors and so on? And in 72, there started a new university in Denmark, Aalborg University Center, which was completely project organized in all topics, also mathematics. There was 2 years start with very interdisciplinary things, and then it becomes more specialized, but there were project works in mathematics, and it was a political profile, Roskilde University, so we projects about all kind of way of supporting workers in this and criticizing the capitalist society and so on, so on, so on. It was very inspiring. 74, Aalborg University opened also as a project organized university, more conservative. Aalborg University was a new place with a new staff. Majority was in the late 20s. Imagine this university, late 20s, staff all around. Aalborg University was integrated by some institutions that existed before. So there was more staff reluctant, but the program was project-based. It was process organization, problem organization, real-life problems, interdisciplinarity, many things. I was in this environment there. And it was extremely inspiring for me. Wow. And I was teaching at a teacher training college at that time. And one of my colleagues there translated Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire into Danish. It came in 74 into Danish. And it was read there, and he organized a workshop, extended weekend, 4 days workshop with a person who had worked with Paulo Freire in Denmark, be engaged in this. It was inspiring. And with this inspiration, I here formulate my PhD project in 75 about critical math education. It was refused because, as my coming supervisor, who was deeply engaged in the new math movement in Denmark, said, there's nothing called critical math education. He knew what was going on in the international scene. Yeah, but anyway, it was refused. I tried, and I tried again. In 77, it was accepted my PhD study. And I was very, very happy for this. And I was so inspired by all these things. And there are more things, because there were many things happening in Germany. It was an inspiring place there. There was many small things, but the big book, Peter Damerow, Elementarmathematik, Lernen für die Praxis, Elementary Mathematics, Learning for Practice. It was a big way of presenting the ideas of critical math education. In practice, it had the double interpretation, practice in the daily life practice of doing things, but also political practice. It was also a German book, so it was not any easy reading. And I was not any good, it was a hard job for me to do the reading. But I worked with this. Dieter Volk, he published a chapter which was very important. Plädoyer für einen problemorientierten Mathematikunterricht in emanzipatorischen Absicht. It was proposing a problem-oriented math education with an emancipatory aim. Because at that time, the notion of emancipation played a big role. And there was a big problem with Habermas, because Habermas had the discussion that there are three knowledge constituting interests: a technical, an understanding, and an emancipatory. And the movement in general education, general critical education, followed Habermas. See, the interest of critical education and an emancipatory interest. And there was much hostility towards the idea of talking about a critical math education, because that was conceptually impossible, because mathematics was guided by a technical interest. So there was much de facto conflicts, and critical education many times ignored. They didn't want to have to do with this idea of critical math education. So Dieter Falk's paper here had to do with this discussion. Stig Meliolsen in Norway published a book, Learning as a Social Process. It was intended as a doctoral thesis. It was refused because it was too political. Dieter Falk edited a work in 1979, Kritische Stichwörter zum Mathematikunterricht, critical key notions for mathematics education. It's a kind of handbook for critical math education, the first handbook of critical math education. And all this makes part of my inspirations. I was so inspired by all this reading, and out of this, I made my contribution to critical math education. I'm very happy for my contribution, but there was so many inspiring things. And there was in the school, of course, in Denmark, the most dominant thing was the school mathematics tradition. It was dominant, but there was space for experiment. And many teachers in mathematics education had problem projects and problem orientation and gaze and this. So I had all this to look at and draw on when I wrote my PhD study. This brings me to a point here about all students. And this is important for me to say. You can think of critical math education as an education for marginalized students. And I agree, it is extremely important to address marginalized students, because in the mainstream research in math education, marginalized student has been largely ignored compared to mainstream students. I wait a little with this. It has been largely ignored. In 2008, there was a conference in Rome for 100 years at the CPPI-ME community or organization. And at that meeting, I said, I have a thesis. I don't know if it's true or false, but let me launch the thesis in the Popperian way. I say 90% of the research in math education address the 10% nicely situated students. 10% of the research address the 90% of the students or the children, this world math education in problematic situation and so on, and so on, and so on. We have to remember that 86% of the world's population of children come from the third world countries. And I said, it's a guess. And the only person said, oh, I challenge your guess. Okay, what is your idea? I think it's 95% of the research concerns with 5% of the children. Okay, that's improvement at the guess. Things have changed due to many initiatives now. Math Education for Society and math and many concerns about marginalized students. It is important. but it's important for me to say critical math education concerns all students. Concerns all students. If we want to struggle against Auschwitz, then we have to remember it's not just an educational struggle where we have to face or to support people who have been destroyed by Auschwitz or be destroyed. It's critical math education is not just an education for Jewish people, Gypsy people, and these minorities which was eliminated. It's an education who have to face the growing Nazism. It's not any easy task, but I show this picture to show, okay, critical math education has to face this community. How to do it if we take the real situation in Germany? It was, you will get killed. So it's not any simple thing, but let us show one more picture. Critical math education have to face such situations. How to address such a group of people, how to address it. And we have many versions of this group of people today. White supremacy people, critical math education have to enter in the middle of the scene and somehow figure out how to challenge white supremacy ideologies. One more picture, just to show the German football team in the stadium in the Olympic Games in 1936. So facing Auschwitz, it's just simply too dangerous in the situation. It could be dangerous. There could be a situation today, context today, where working for critical mathematics is dangerous, really dangerous. But still, it is a vision. And this is the reason I think of math education has to do with concerns and hope. Even if we are in a desperate situation, you can have visions, you can hope, you can try. Is it possible to do something about it? In my lectures in South Africa, I have lectures talking about education after apartheid. Because we could say it's an aim of education to make sure that no new apartheid happens again. And such an education have to be in solidarity with Black people. It has to face the people who was in favor of apartheid. They have to face the white supremacy ideology. Critical math education has to be all around. It has to face all kind of situation. This is the reason I try to think of critical math education as having to do with concerns and hopes, not as strategies, because strategies, we don't know the strategies. Situation change, critical math education in Brazil, different from critical math education in Hungary today, in India today, in rich neighborhood in India, in poor neighborhoods, I don't know what. One of my PhD students, João Luiz Musinati, had a project in the upper class or rich environment in Sao Paulo, critical math education, having to do with family support. So he investigated the economic situation of poor people, poor family. How is it? And of course, he met all these comments. People are poor because they don't want to work. Why give family support to lazy people? They could be invested much better in other places. Critical math education is a dialogue. You have to engage in dialogue. Reno Vital published a book with the title Pedagogy of Dialogue and Conflicts. It's a very good condensed version, expression. It's not dialogues with friends or your solidarity. It's also dialogue with people you oppose. This is a task of critical math education. It's very important to have this in mind. Let me show you some references. It is references by authors from Brazil, because critical math education develops in different contexts, in different languages. The first big development in critical math education took place in German and Scandinavian languages. Then it was transferred to English. And here I must mention Marilyn Frankenstein, who did a fantastic publication, 83. She published a paper with the title Critical Math Education. It's the first time, to my knowledge, that the word critical math education appears in English. And he made a unique contribution to critical math education by having a big elaboration with reference to Paulo Freire. Paulo Freire had been around, but just as a general source of inspiration, among many other things, Marilyn was the first who saw that his approach could give a particular strong profile to critical math education. Fantastic. There was, or is a period, critical math education is in English, but critical math education now is very much developed in Portuguese. There are many publications in Portuguese. The first have to do with financial education. We just show them it's all everything to do with critical math education, critical math education, critical math education. And I don't know, now just go on, show them, Alexander. 3 more references here. Take the 3. They, one in progress, belief, and that comes in English. So some of the PhD studies from Brazil comes in English, but many are in Portuguese. There is Musinati. He has written the book with the reference I refer to. It's the last one. It's a book based on his thesis from 22. More books in progress, and everything critical math education. There is one here, the first one. I want to refer to Daniela's first one. That was an overview of literature in Portuguese, which has to do with critical math education. It was a broad interpretation having to do with, but it includes more than 100 references. I don't know today, but I could guess that if we count the books in Portuguese in critical math education, the thesis, doctoral thesis in critical math education or closely related, master thesis in critical mathematics and closely related, we get to around 100. It's a much production. If you take articles, I have no number. So it's a huge thing. It gets into English. It will come into English, but it's good to be aware that there is much production in critical math education outside English. How it goes in Japanese, how it goes in Chinese, I don't know about. But we have to be open to, there could be many things happening around in languages we are not really aware of. It might be that we only see tip of the things as in Portuguese and English, but many things exist beyond that. I want to show you this picture. There is a colloquium, a research colloquium in critical math education in Portuguese. Some of the authors are all researchers, happy researchers, young researchers. It's researchers in math education. I'm happy to be part of this, and I'm on the picture there. And if you look a little bit careful, Erik Gutstein is on the picture there, his head is almost in the middle, in the back. Goodstein was joining this colloquium also. And there is the Pateria. It is the group of Miriam's and my PhD students. We have more PhD students, but we were together in the MESS conference there. And this is the Pateria. It's called the coffee shop because I always have my supervision, not at the universities, but in coffee shops, because this is the right atmosphere to establish critical math education, I feel. So these are contributing to critical math education. Let me finish with referring to the notion of aperism. I want to highlight, to a critical mathematics education, it is important to acknowledge that critique is a preliminary, tentative, and open-ended. Critique is an expression of concerns and hopes, as well as uncertainties and doubt. It is important to acknowledge that aphoretic situation makes part of human life. Aphoretic situation is we cannot find a conclusion. Let me my last word in the convention. It became a little bit longer than expected, but I got too eager. Thank you.
Let's see. Thank you, Ole. We have some questions here. I'm gonna stop this for the moment and look at.
I'll be ready to answer some questions now. I know Paul also have something to say, but let me take a couple of questions now.
Okay. Marilyn Frankenstein says, how tragic, this is a comment, how tragic that Auschwitz is happening again right under our internet eyes, particularly tragically a genocide carried out by descendants of many of the victims of the Nazi genocide and especially financed by the U.S. government, pressured by U.S. Zionists, Christian and Jewish. Our education systems have clearly failed in this critical aspect. And then Bjarnheither I think Bjarnheither's from Iceland. I noticed that name. The other comment says, maybe the focus should not be to prevent only the same horrific things like Nazi against Jewish people or other minorities in Auschwitz from being repeated, but also prevent new horrific things like Israel against Palestinians in Palestine, particularly in Gaza, preventing things like this from happening.
I'm very happy with this comment. I follow the comments. I follow also this comment that Auschwitz, as I mentioned, is Jewish people, Gypsy people, and many other minorities. That's it. When the convention, the Genocide Convention, was formulated by United Nations, it was somehow the genocide caused by the Nazi system, which was in the mind. When the genocide was defined, legally speaking, it appeared. It was not the only genocide the world has experienced. It has happened before. The North American genocide is the most brutal genocide. The indigenous people destroyed. It's a genocide. And what is happening right now in Palestine, technically speaking, conceptually speaking, there might be some sophistication, but it could be brought for the trial. With South Africa brought it for the trial. It's important to do it, see how it is. Technically speaking, and I follow the Brazilian president saying, common sense speaking, we are dealing with a genocide. I'm happy with the comments by Meryl and by the other person, and I agree with this. We have to be aware that horrible things, it don't need to be for critical math education. Of course, it have to face this horrible situation, but that also, I was thinking of Auschwitz also as a metaphor for many other kinds of exploitations, oppressions, and this and so on and so on. But the comments about Marilyn's comments and the other comments, I'm very happy with this.
Thank you, Ole. And we have a phone call who has raised their hand. This is for CKI-001. I'm going to allow you to talk here. There we go. Oop. You're muted right now. If you can.
I withdraw again. Sorry.
Hello. Yes, go ahead.
I withdraw my comment. Sorry, it was
okay.
I just pressed the wrong button.
Okay, no worries. Thank you. Let's see. All right, and we have another comment. Let me look back at this screen. Okay. We have 4 comments, so I'll go through them one at a time. The first one is, or questions rather. The first one is from Kenya Overton. How do you convince pre-service teachers that critical mathematics education is for everyone, not just for oppressed people?
Here I would, for instance, think of anti-racist education. In my book, Critical Math Education, I've been very much concerned about racism, and I have indicated a way to address racism, representativity in terms of number and so on. And there I will discuss, if we are going to face racism, who are we going to face? Who are we going to? Is that an education for people who are suffering from racism in one way or another? Or are we going to face people who somehow be on the other side, on the oppressive side? I will just raise the question, and I will argue for this. I will not think my obligation is to convince, because then you are somehow in a convincing department. I will more think you have to raise the question, and then people might react or comment or dialogue. You always have to think that critical math education has to do with dialogue. You engage in dialogue. It's not a department of propaganda. You have to convince people about this and that and so on and so on. You have to engage in dialogue. You have to show what you are concerned about. You have to listen what they think about your concern. You can argue for your concern, and that's it. I would not have any problem to be in a community where they don't agree anything, like João Luís Musinati. His students didn't agree anything about what he was saying, but he engaged in dialogue. If I have teachers who think another way, I will listen to them, I will listen to their arguments, I will put my arguments, and then we see what's happening.
Thank you. Ollie, the next one is from Candia Morgan in the UK.
Yeah.
In English, Candia says, in English, the phrase critical mathematics education is ambiguous. Which is critical, the mathematics or the education? I think this ambiguity is not there in some other languages, but perhaps it is convenient to allow and to exploit the ambiguity.
It could be. That's ambiguity is not something have to be eliminated. It could be a productive. But if we go for instance, to a German Mathematikunterricht, it's a one kind of thing. And you can have classical Mathematikunterricht or frontal Unterricht, teacher-guided Mathematikunterricht, and you can have critical or kritische Mathematikunterricht. So that's critical applied to mathematics education. The very notion of critical mathematics, if I think of mathematics as a school discipline, okay, but if you take it as a research topic or contact topic, then I'm a little bit doubt what I mean by critical mathematics. You would have a critical attitude towards mathematics. but I cannot see there are some topics which is critical mathematics and there are some topics which is just mathematics. Fractions. Yeah, I use many fractions when I discuss the bias index with respect to racism, but are they critical? Critical fraction? No. I get a little bit confused about what is in fact the meaning of talking about critical mathematics as something being critical. I prefer to talk about critical mathematics education and thinking of mathematics education as something which could be critical. But Candy Morgan make a point. There could be productive ambiguities. This I agree with. Ambiguities is not to be eliminated. It is to be open, maybe new ideas. This could be.
Peter Gates from the UK says, can one really be a critical mathematics educator without really being a Marxist, even though one might not want to admit that?
I think so. And I could just point to one example. It is myself. I don't consider myself a Marxist. I consider myself more like a colleague to Marx. In the sense, I don't assume a Marxist terminology. I don't assume a person to have some theoretical framework that I should pick up to. I don't do this. I'm not assuming any position out there. I don't assume a position of Wittgenstein. I don't assume a position of this and that. I don't assume the theoretical frame of Marx. But clearly, I am very much concerned with the same things that he is concerned about. The oppression of the workers. I've read carefully Engel's study of the working class condition in England. Seeing this, I'm very concerned about. I share concern with Karl Marx. I'm not dealing with his conceptual structure. I'm not dealing with his determinism, because in this sense, Marx is part of the modernity. I'm not part of this determinism. I don't assume this. Marx also has a theory of what we call the hierarchy of crises. In the bottom, there was a fundamental crisis, the clash between the working class and bourgeoisie. And out of this crisis, had all other crises in the family, in the working place, and this and that. I have not this hierarchical assumption. There could be many crises interacting in different ways. So I feel myself, I'm a critical math educator without being a Marxist. But I share his concern. I share his concern.
Thank you. We have three more to get through right now. Matt de Andrade, I think, but maybe that's Melissa. Hello, Oli and all. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for your words and for the opportunity to ask questions. I'm a young academic working in mathematics education for engineering students. My students are all very passionate about sustainability and climate justice. I was wondering if you could briefly comment on the possibilities to integrate critical mathematics education into sustainability contexts.
I can refer to my book, chapter 4, the last section, because there I talk about environmental justice. And it's very important to think critical math education has been very much related to social justice. I also emphasize critical math education is also related to environmental justice. Not that I see social justice and environmental justice as very separated. They are very much integrated, very much integrated. And we can just reconsider the Gini index, which talk about the distribution of the wealth in the particular countries, or the unequal distribution of wealth in the particular countries. There are big group of people who have a little income or little money and few who have much. If you think of which group enjoys social resources, natural resources, it's an extreme unequal use of natural resources from this earth here. Large group of people enjoy very little natural resources. Huge group of people enjoys huge amount of natural resources. There is an unequal distribution of economic resource and natural resources. Everything have to, and they are correlated, very much correlated. So social justice, environmental justice are very integrated notions, and it's a concern of critical math education to address social injustices and environmental injustices in this sense there. The other thing, critical math education is also for university students. It's also for university students in mathematics. You have to think of, they have to be engaged in critical math education. They are the people who are going to apply mathematics in an advanced way. They are reading and writing the world in an advanced way with mathematics for different purposes, interest, capitalist interest, I don't know what. If they are doing it for environmental interest, wow. But it's very important to engage engineering students, all kinds of students in critical math education. It is my point of emphasizing critical math education is for all students, also for research students in pure mathematics. I'm very happy with this initiative there, and very happy to hear about the students who are somehow concerned about sustainability.
Thank you, Ole. Ulrika Ryan says, this discussion brings to our attention ethical dimensions of critical mathematics education. How do you see students and teachers dialoguing about critical mathematics in terms of, for example, racism, considering the asymmetric power relations? How do you see the role of ethics in relation to dialogue?
See, it turns out to be a bit complex question, but there is an important turn going out in the philosophy of mathematics. I felt I have contributed much to this, and Paul Ernest have contributed much to this. It is the ethical turn in the philosophy of mathematics. All around, a colleague of me and I published a book in Danish in 2011, where we talk about 4 dimensions of a philosophy of mathematics: an ontological dimension, epistemological dimension, a sociological dimension, and an ethical dimension. And this is, to the best of my knowledge, the first time ethics has introduced as part of a philosophy of mathematics. Not that you get much around by publishing a book in Danish. So it stayed calmly there. But all around, and I reworked it and make a publication in 2019 with the same 4 dimensions. And we have been working for this, and Paul Ernest have been working on this. He has been very dedicated to open the ethical field of the philosophy of mathematics. And this is, you could also think of it as a political dimension. It's a consideration about all the impact, what could be done by mathematics, what is the impact of mathematics, what interest mathematics might serve, etc., etc., etc. And this is very much connected to opening the ethical dimension in mathematics education. And here, the main person in this, I can look at him right in front of me, is Paul Ernest there. And then in this there came many, many elements. And one is, of course, the having to do with dialogue. Here, let me start out with this, because then the explosions in the many topics here. But let this we might comment to this very important observation there. maybe I don't know, because maybe Paul need to enter the picture with some presentation, some comments. Are there one more question for me, you think, Alex?
Sure. Let's see.
Okay, we take one more, then Paul enter.
Yeah, just one more.
Yeah.
We have, let's see, this is from Linlia Sachs. Hi, Oli, are there limits to discussing socially relevant topics in mathematics classes, considering that mathematics does not provide the basis for in-depth discussions of things like that, such as history or sociology and so forth?
Oh, I missed the first. Read again a little bit slowly.
Sure. Are there limits to discussing socially relevant topics in mathematics?
Social irrelevant, you say?
Socially relevant.
See, this, okay, no, okay, fine. Then I would say, theoretically speaking, from the perspective of critical method, I don't see any limits. I don't see any limits. Then comes to say, okay, math education makes part of a practice. It's a school practice. It makes part of a school program. It's part of a project for getting to exam, and so on, so on, so on. It is this, how to think of this. And here, if we come to think of the idea of Bob Moses, educating Black students to prepare for further education. He was very much concentrated on the content. Not that the content was social, it discussed social issues and this, it was content issue, because he saw his aim as bringing Black students to master the normal content, to be able to pass so they have opportunities in life. And this you have to consider. What is the situation of this process there? Is it discussing social issues? Then there's no image, but could it have other impacts for the students? Let me take an example. I was visiting Barcelona, and I was for a period there, and then they told me, here we have a program, critical math education program. How interesting, say, wow, it's not for everybody, but for some groups of students, we have a critical math education program. And it's, tell about it. It's with social relevant topics. It's without any speed. The student decide, it's a conversation. You hear the whole story. Who are these students who join this program? It is the Gypsy students in Barcelona. Okay. What is the impact? No Gypsy student has any possibility to join any further education in Barcelona. It was their critical math education became an isolation. They were not prepared for, could not leave. It was a parking place for Gypsy children. So when you have this concern about where is the limits, you have to consider the social reality around, because critical math education, with all the visions of critical math education put in place, serves as an obstruction for moving on anywhere. That could be a consequence. So this needs reflections. So there could be limits. You have to consider the conditions, the situations, and what's going on.
Thank you. Very good point. Paul, do you want to take over?
Sure. But it's been delightful to hear so many questions answered. But I think this is the moment when I'll offer my pre-prepared a speech, if that's okay. So now, hopefully you can see my slides.
Good, Paul.
Is that good?
Yes, sir. It looks good.
Okay, so these are my reflection and improvisations based on what this session is all about really is Ula's publication. This book, Critical Mathematics Education, which came out with Springer recently, well, a year ago or so. And this is a way of getting people to think about the content. I mean, of course, it's one stage towards the end of a life's work. Towards the end, I mean, it comes after a lot of other publications. Critical Mathematics Education. So I want to say a little bit about now let me just see if I can change the page. Some of the themes, some of the contents, and then go off on a tangent, my own reactions with some content. So in this book, there are so many themes. There's a lot of practical and theoretical wisdom, and the topics include realistic student hopes and expectations in the context of mathematics education, the maths of democracy and justice, taking the student's point of view. Maybe we don't do that enough in mathematics education because we've got the stuff and we give it to them. Making a better future in society. That's surely something that certainly is addressed in this. The philosophy of mathematics, not a recondite subject, but what is this stuff that we're dealing in? Critical mathematics education, what is it? Where does it come from? We've got quite a nice picture already, but it's a never-ending story, etc., etc. So many things. So these are the official contents of the book, and you'll notice that there are 4 sections, learning and landscapes, and you notice that the 4th subsection, sustainability and risks, was one of the things that Ula was pointing at. We were talking about how the sustainability, the environment, etc., environmental justice fit into mathematics education. So he starts off talking about concerns and hopes. He talks about landscapes, and that's a typical technical term he defines, and racism, the erosions of democracy, sustainability, and risks. Risk is something that's very mathematized, but something we don't talk about enough in mathematics, perhaps. To learn or not to learn, a big question. That's the first of the 4 sections. Then crises and formatting, because critical, as Ula's pointed out in his writings, critical and crises are related terms, especially if you trace them back to their Greek origins. Crisis and critique, the banality of mathematical expertise, taking Hannah Arendt's term about the banality of evil, often big things look like they're routine. So mathematical expertise, which looks routine, actually has big consequences. Mathematics and ethics, the last question recent question that was answered. Mathematics and crises, picturing or performing, whether mathematics is a description or indeed an act, stuff that changes things like the world we live in. And the answer, you won't be surprised to hear, is yes, mathematics is performative. It does change things. We carry on with the contents. Critique and dialogue. Dialogue's a term we've heard a lot of this afternoon. Critique of mathematics, a critique of critique. We need to look at ourselves, as well as mathematicians, as well as teachers, as well as researchers. We need to think, is critique the highest value? Initial formulations of critical mathematics education. We heard a lot about the continental and other histories where these ideas come from. A dialogic theory of learning mathematics, and we've heard about dialogue. And then in his 4th and last section, width and depth, looking at the range of all students. We just heard Ula talking about how it's very important that critical mathematics education is offered to the top sections as well as others, because they're the ones with the power to make decisions. They're the ones who wield that power. And if mathematics is seen as just a neutral technical term, then we don't, we're not changing the people who pull the levers of power. Going beyond stereotypes, social theorizing and the formatting power of mathematics, which relates to what I was saying about whether mathematics is performative. And then finally, a philosophy of critical mathematics education, which pulls it all together. So there's an awful lot in this book, and that's what this session is about. And you heard Ula's wonderful commentary on it, but there's a lot more going on and a lot of depth to all the things we've heard about. So now moving on to the ideas I want to throw into the mix, improvisation on the themes of ULAs. First of all, well, two sets of themes, one about hope, motivation, affect, and student perspectives. You'll have seen me read some sections that deal with this in the contents of ULA's book. And then mathematics and its philosophy and its relations with society. So something I knocked up to talk about here, learner affect with regard to mathematics. And it's something good to remind, and I made these figures up, but I hope you'll, like Ula was talking about 10 versus 90, you know, this is illustrative. You mustn't take mathematics too literally. I keep telling non-mathematical colleagues that, you know, it's a metaphor. But here what I'm trying to point out is that there is a chunk of learners, and they're often those disregarded, excluded by society, who see mathematics and react with rejection, revulsion, negativity. Maybe it's a small, but maybe it's not so small. It depends where you go and which groups. Then there's also a more passive bunch of a lack of interest, neutrality, unwillingness, passive aggression, passive resistance. Let's say that's 10 or 20% of the student population. Then you've got this compliant big chunk in the middle. They comply, their mechanical productivity, some engagement in limited domains, and maybe engagement and efforts for extrinsic reasons. They know they got to get the exams, so they got to slog on through. We've now dealt with 80% of the student population. And what we all hope for, and where we all came maybe, is out the bottom segment, the positive views about mathematics, and where we engage with his engagement and interest for intrinsic reasons. Mathematics is interesting and beautiful. Enthusiasm and commitment, and maybe even obsessive engagement at a small proportion, because successful mathematicians often engage in obsessively with the problems they're solving. So we've got to be aware there's a whole spread of effective responses, and most of them are neutral or negative, which is a bit sad, isn't it? So what are we offering students in our mathematics teaching? Does it foster their hope? Does it kindle their enthusiasm? Does it light the way to student futures? Does it feature in their lives? Is it a forced promise of delayed gratification? Will that gratification come? I think we need to address more not everyone is lit up, and a lot of people are switched off, and it's a worry. So why bother with mathematics? In looking at the lower segments, and these are made up figures as well, but if we look at by lower, I mean in attainment, but also often in socioeconomic groups, the bottom 10 or 20% in the UK, 20, 30% in the USA, 50% in Brazil, may fall into some of these negative categories. And in their lives, they may lack dignity, security, enough food, shelter for study, books, IT, and you want them to take mathematics very seriously and devote all their time to it, or a lot of it. And these days, mathematics and education don't even guarantee good jobs. We can't even say, get on with this algebra because you'll get a good job when you get your grades. These days, there are graduates, doing waiter jobs. I'm not knocking waiter jobs, but you don't need a math degree to be a waiter. And for many, maths is boring, difficult, and irrelevant lives. So why should they even try? Is it the students' all fault? Is it the fault of mathematics teaching in schools? And what I didn't bother to write was, is it the fault of society? We need to look critically, and here's the word critical, at future students, how they see their futures, and Ula looks into this, their foregrounds, the possibilities, hope even. How does that fit with what we offer? We know this wonderful stuff we're giving out, but not everyone is getting the same buzz out of it. So pure mathematics, I'm slightly embarrassed because I'm talking about pure mathematics for a moment, and I've got a picture. Well, actually, it's applied mathematics, isn't it? Because it's the standard model of particle physics, a Lagrangian. So I guess that's applied, but it's a lot of symbols. So let's call it pure mathematics. Is the real mathematics the pure mathematics, Well, I was certainly brought up to think it was the real stuff. You know, it's like whiskey. It's the real stuff. It's distilled out of all that wine or whatever, beer, and then you get the concentrated, the real stuff. Is pure mathematics the real stuff of mathematics? Is that the real? Well, there's this image of mathematics as a monolith of well-founded theory. It's a popular image. Not everyone shares that picture, but I quite like it to illustrate this notion of a clean thing that goes up in stages by logic and, you know, reasoning. So even though mathematics is not a unique and unified subject, there's a myth that it is. Even though the name mathematics is plural, we think of it as this thing that this and we know we've put to one side the technical problems, Gödel's theorem and other limitative things that force us to step back a bit from certainty and absolutism, etc. But even ignoring that, this image ignores applications. It neglects application. Applied practices are the sources of maths historically and in the sciences. And they make up 99.9% of its practices and uses. So is pure mathematics the real thing when it's just a tiny little specialist thing? So real mathematics, we might see it as a family of applied practices. Leaving pure mathematics to one side for the moment, it's not just a tower, a monolith, this beautiful, erect, you know, logical progression from foundations up all the way up. Actually, it's a city. It's you know, with so many different domains, many departments of applied mathematics. There are applications of mathematics in science, business, accountancy, computing, all around the city. There's digital devices. All that stuff, all our smartphones, all that, you know, even your cars these days, everything is run by, I'm speaking, and it's coming to you as a series of zeros and ones, which are then being reinterpreted to make a simulacrum of my voice. We also have school mathematics education. The philosophy of mathematics ignores that stuff. School mathematics, that's the baby stuff. That's not the real stuff. And then we've got everyday practical street mathematics, ethnomathematics, the stuff that people do who are not pure mathematicians proving theorems. And then critical mathematics as well. And in practice, citizens scrutinizing society through maths lenses. That's part of critical mathematics. So what I'm saying is that this view of mathematics as this pure stuff is a very limited falsification. So in this diagram, what I've tried to do is represent, do you see there's a little dot? I don't know if you can see my little arrowhead going round it. That represents pure mathematicians. And in the UK, I hope you can see this. On my screen, it's a little bit hidden, some of my numbers. What getting approximate in Britain, I'm saying pure mathematics, let's say that there's 10,000, 0.01 of a million. Was that a sign, Alex? Am I shouting or getting excited or something?
Nope.
No. Good.
All good.
Yep.
Good. Applied mathematics, so applied mathematicians, maybe we got 10 times as many. Maybe it's 100,000. Students and teachers of mathematics, maybe 10 million in the UK. Users of mathematics, okay, I rounded it up to a nice figure, 100 million. Digital devices, you know, 1 billion, 1,000 million. So pure mathematics is that little dot. So that's the less than 1/100%, and applied mathematics, the real stuff, the stuff that's going on in the world, 99.99%. All right, I made the figures up, but you get the idea. It's a lot damn bigger. And now, if we look at philosophy of mathematics, you know, we're told philosophy of mathematics, philosophy of pure mathematics, that's the real stuff, it's the big stuff. But really, and this is a falsification, because if I wanted to represent the name philosophy of pure mathematics and the name philosophy of applied mathematics proportionately, with regard, as one is 0.01%, and the other one is 99.99. My philosophy of applied math would be so big, I wouldn't even get the P on the screen. So philosophy, and I want to argue that what Euler offers is a philosophy of applied mathematics, that Euler's critical mathematics education, this book that we're discussing, but also earlier works like the one that Euler talked about coming out in about, was it 2009 or 11, maybe 2011, with Euler Raven. I can't pronounce it in the Danish way, but then translate.
The Danish version got out in 2011, and the English version 2019.
2019. So that's been out for 13 years and accessible to us for 5 years. And these publications offer the first, in my view, my claim, substantial philosophy of applied mathematics. And it's about time, given the proportions, the ratios I showed you. And what I learned, and maybe it's a secret and I shouldn't be revealing it, but Euler's next work, which is in progress, will be, it's not named yet, but it's a critical philosophy of mathematics with some name, some form, and this will add to this work he's doing about looking at the philosophy of applied mathematics, looking at the philosophy of all mathematics, pure, applied, social, ethical, all those ontological, epistemological, all those dimensions we heard. Mathematics and ethics. I don't know if you can read that top label I gave it. I can't because my funny little, I moved it up. My funny little bar of actions is cut. So I've got mathematics and ethics, and there's the guy in the mathematics department, head of department, if you like, talking to the departmental secretary. Ms. Burney, do we have anything on right and wrong? Do we have anything on good and evil? Well, the answer, we know the answer. That's why it's a joke. No, I don't think so. Not in the mathematics department. So a philosophy of critical mathematics is more than, so I've said it's a philosophy of applied mathematics, but it's much more because it offers a social critique of mathematics and uses mathematics in society not separate, and doesn't make it separate from mathematics pure or applied, but is based on values. This is my interpretation. And those values, we've talked about ethics, justice, equality, dignity, democracy, caring, as well as the traditional concerns of mathematics with truth, accuracy, and prediction. Can mathematics be neutral? Here's some figures for you. 1,200 Israelis were killed last year, 32,000 Palestinians have been killed, 1.5 million Palestinians are starving. Some figures, are they neutral? In the UK, 52% voted for Brexit. The immediate impact on the pound dropped 15% in its value. It's never picked up again. The gross domestic product of the UK has dropped by 4 to 6% since then. And in general in the UK, not necessarily caused by Brexit, but possibly related. We now see 10 million citizens seeing their debts, who are in debt, and their debts are growing. We see 2 million children destitute. And Britain has recently invited 800,000 refugees and 30,000 irregular refugees, which are said by the government be swamping the UK. Oh dear, we got this big problem. So how are they going to solve it? Send 300 annually to Rwanda illegally at a cost of only 500 million. Well, that's just in the news today. Those are just some figures. Mathematics is the perfect soap. And there's a nice picture of math soap. As you can see, I added the word maths to a picture of soap. It washes out moral dirt, ethical stains, marks of responsibility and feelings, caring and empathy. We can get rid of all those with our magical mathematical soap. For example, Stalin said, although some people claim he picked it up from somewhere else or whatever, but never mind, Stalin said, one death is a tragedy. It is. 1 million deaths is just a statistic. Maths takes care of ethics for you. It washes it out. One rough sleeper, and I see lots of them on the roads here, on the streets of my country, in Exeter where I am now, or in London where I was last week. One rough sleeper is a sad story, and I've heard some of those sad stories. I've talked to some of those people. 5,000 rough sleepers. Oh, that's just an inconvenience. Or they're going to fine them. That's the way to deal with it. Fine you up to £2,000 each if you're found rough sleeping. I mean, that's the way to solve the problem, isn't it? I mean, these feckless people, you know, fine them. One hungry child hurts me. If I see a hungry child, it hurts me. 2 million hungry children, that's parental failure. Maths is wonderful. It washes out, you know, you make big figures and suddenly you don't feel it, you know. Perfect soap for ethics. So all I've done is to improvise on themes by Ulla. These are some of my thoughts. Obviously, there's much more in critical mathematics education, the book we're talking about. I did a review in the Philosophy of Mathematics Education Journal, and it might also be forthcoming in the Journal for Theoretical and Mathematics Education, hosted by Alexander, this website that we're operating through. And that's it. Just a few ideas.
Thank you so much, Paul. And yes, that review is, I've got it in the works now. I'll have it live soon. We had, let's see, one more question come in. Critical math education is very much in the nexus of practice, theory, and research. But the question of links to the dimension of policy and policymakers and system level interventions still remains unexplored and not well understood. Ola, do you have any comments on that?
I'm just curious, do the question appear in this Q&A story here?
Yes, at the very bottom.
In the bottom. Where?
If you click on Q&A, it should pop up on your end.
I have Dimitris Maris here first. So
Okay.
long.
Scroll to the very bottom. I haven't
That's
closed it.
Reno Capital.
Oh, yeah. It's Renuka Vital, I think.
Ah, see. There we go. Yeah. It's very important to think that the visions or the aspirations of critical math education, it's often been said that it's something that the teacher should try to do. It's put some obligation or strategies or proposal for the teacher to implement in the practice. This is one thing, but it might be a very small part of the whole story. If you think of this, which happened at Roskilde University in 1972, it was an institution. It was the planning. It changed the profile of the whole institution. So I see very much the concern of critical math education as something which has to be supported, engaged in the planning, the structuring of the educational system. It's not just as a vision for teachers. It's also a vision for how to organize bigger things or organize educational system, or how to organize an education at a university or in a school or in a community and so on. It's not just an obligation for teachers to implement this. It's very important to think of critical mathematical education as an expression of hopes and concerns, but it could be hopes and concerns in terms of an institution.
Thank you, Oli. And Kyle Whipple from Wisconsin just says that thank you both very much. And he's really enjoyed the talk.
Thank you.
We have a couple more comments. Let me just look. Arindam Bose from Bombay says, what is not well understood is how to incorporate the ideas within the CME domain in textbooks. For example, for classroom practice or for teacher support.
Here I get a bit concerned because I see critical mathematical education as very much a concern. It's a concern of addressing something. clearly you can have, I don't think of critical mathematical education as similar to a curriculum. So you should say, now you have a curriculum there, critical math education curriculum. So you don't start with this, you start with that, and you start with a problem and not with fraction. You take first, etc., etc. I don't think of it in terms of a curriculum. So if you think in terms of textbooks, then I think a material which could support addressing the concern of critical math education. And I have no problem in see a traditional textbook could also be used. There could be text in a traditional text which is useful to master this technique for address social problems. I don't think a critical math education as it could be designed a textbook, and then you say, okay, now we have tomorrow I will test you in critique 1 and 2. It's a critique until page 3. We have 3. No, it's a concern, it's an expression, and so on. So I would more think of not textbooks really, but in material could be used. It could be a material exposing real life problems, but also books exposing technique, mathematical technique to address this problem. It could be relevant with some traditional techniques in statistics, traditional statistics in graph, making a graph and reading a graph. So it's more like this, I see it, not as something, okay, we are missing a textbook. This I feel, there's something going wrong here. It's not exactly this, but it is. But I agree, there could be textbooks which includes elements which could be useful for the perspective of critical math education.
Can I make one comment just to say, Ulla has stressed dialogue, and that includes listening to the students and finding out which topics are of interest to them and drawing on those hot topics that they care about and you know that get them worked up and you know looking at them through mathematics and not all top down, but also listening to them.
And we really have to be clear about this. Clearly, you listen to the students and what problems are in their mind, what are they concerned about. Students might well be concerned about how to solve quadratic equations because they know this is important to pass that next test. So they don't want too much social issue things because they want to listen to the curriculum. And I don't say, you need to be critical. Okay, we are in dialogue. And we have to respect these wishes also from the student and see how to operate with this. This is, it's not, and it could be if they have social problems, we would not consider, okay, it's not our social problems. It is how to enjoy better the extra money you have. It could be that you are facing students who are very deep in the white supremacy ideology. It could be these students. So we have to think how to interact with these students. We listen to them, but we are in a situation of dialogue and maybe conflict. It could be. This is Renuka's word, and I'm happy she has been here, and I hope she will listen to this because this is a very important couple of concepts.
Thank you, Ole. And just to respect the time limit that we've set on the event, I'll give everybody a 2-minute warning. Paul, do you have any final comments?
No, I'd rather hand it over to Ulla because this is all about him celebrating his wonderful work. So please, Ulla.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, very much thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the comments and questions. I'm very happy for this interaction. And I really feel myself, sometimes I've been asked, are you the first in critical math education? I don't feel anything like this. Don't feel anything like this. I have told you, I have a rich, many people have been inspiring for me, but I feel I do my best to contribute to the further development of critical math education. I do my best to do this, and I'm very much open to the situation that critical math education in a context I have not thought about, we have not thought about how to think of critical mathematics education in China, how to think of critical mathematics in Saudi Arabia. What does it mean? There's situations I have not thought about. What does it mean? I'm open to the new context. I have more fingers. I got one finger in the door, and I got a new perspective. I'm acknowledged I could have more fingers and more doors. There could appear new perspectives to me, and I could get newer perspectives outside Europe, outside Brazil, where I am now, outside South Africa, outside North America, new context, a new historical context. There could be new environmental catastrophes, new challenges to critical math education. Who knows? Peace challenges, genocides, to take the most brutal things, new kind of exclusion we have not thought of before. When the resources get too limited, how to eliminate people from resources, new challenges, and we have to be open for all this. And in this mix, we have our hopes and our concerns.
Well
Critical
said.
math education is a dynamics, and I'm happy to contribute to this, and I'm happy to contribute together with all of you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ole. That was wonderful. And thank you, Paul, for being here today. I'll just do a quick plug. Paul is an editor of another book in the same series, Advances in Mathematics Education. That book is coming out this summer, and we will be holding a similar book launch for that. Information will be forthcoming. You can sign up for our mailing list on our website to get that information, but it will be publicized in the same avenues as before. So look for that sometime later this year. But I just want to thank you.
Can I just add the
Oh, sure.
title, Ethics in Mathematics Education, or Ethics and Mathematics Education? All right, that's the book title.
Yes, Ethics in Mathematics Education. The subtitle is The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. We're very excited to be hosting that event later this year after it's released. So I want to thank you all for being here today and giving us a couple of hours of your time. Thank you to Dr. Ole Skovsmose of Denmark and Brazil, and thank you to Dr. Paul Ernest of the United Kingdom. Such a special event to have both of you here together, because you have influenced so many of us in the field, and it's just an honor. And thank you for giving us your time and your insights today. I know we've all learned a lot. Thank you all again for being here. Information about Ole's work, as well as the video recording of this seminar, will be available on our website and our YouTube channel sometime in the next few days. So thank you all very much. And thanks, Ole and Paul, again.